Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture. Hello, everybody. This is Johnny, and today I want to welcome everybody because we have a really important guest with us. He's a very accomplished author, award-winning author, has a history of developing his own marketing agency with some really interesting projects that he worked on. But today we're going to talk about the subject of reality. I'd like to welcome Stephen Hawley Martin to the show. Hello, Stephen.
Yeah, hello, Johnny. Good to be here. I'm glad you invited me, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Well, thank you. Stephen, I know you've written lots of books and you have a marketing background, but what's really interesting, I think, would be for our listeners is the investigation you've done in the reality. Can we talk about that today?
I'd love to talk about that. I've just written
Okay.
a book about it, just published it, and I'm hoping people will read it. It's called A New Theory of Human Life and Existence, and
The
it's
new
all about
theory.
what we are and why we're here and, what reality is all about. So let's talk about it.
Wow. How'd you get well, first of all, how'd you get interested in exploring the nature of reality?
Well, that's a good question, Johnny. As you mentioned, I've been in business for a long time in marketing and advertising. I was president of an ad agency that I was a partner in, and when I started out, I took a job in Baltimore right out of college at an ad agency there. And after a couple of years, I was living in an apartment with two other 20 something bachelors, but I had a horrible case of the flu one weekend, and on a Saturday evening, I was up in my bedroom. It was a two-story, apartment in an old brownstone in the Bolton Hill area of Baltimore, which is a really cool area. But anyway, I was nursing this flu, and I heard people come in downstairs, and it was no doubt my roommates, had brought in a party from somewhere, and
Uh,
I heard a lot of after a while, things going on down there, and I thought, "Gosh, I'm missing out on this," and I felt awful, but, I thought, "Well, I'll just get up, put some clothes on, go down there and pretend I'm okay, and it'll be alright." And that's what I did. So I went down and I had a couple of, drinks, and, I had and there this was in the 1970s. It was a long time ago, 50 some years ago, and, there were some people passing around a funny looking cigarette, and I took a couple of drags off that.
oh,
And, anyway, after a few minutes, I really just felt like I was gonna pass out. I mean, I couldn't stand up. And so I managed to get to the staircase and almost crawl back up the stairs to my bedroom. I flopped down on it. It felt like felt like it was spinning around. I was like on the blade of a helicopter that was taking off, and then suddenly I felt okay. All of that dizziness, all of that nausea, all that had just disappeared, and I was fine. And I looked around, I looked up, and I realized I was up near the ceiling. And I kinda looked at the ceiling, just looked at some of the cracks thinking, "Hey, we need to some spackle and some paint here." And then I looked down, and I saw my body on the bed,
uh-huh.
rolled out like roadkill. And it shocked me because, I grew up in a kind of a secular family that, didn't wasn't into religion, and I had believed what I been taught in science class in school and college and biology and so forth, that we were, basically meat robots with brains that create our, consciousness and that all that exists is matter and, it's the materialist, physicalist point of view. And so I figured, how in the world can this be? Obviously, it came to me pretty quickly. I'm not my body. I'm my consciousness because I'm up here and my body's down there. And this I assume was a near death experience, or and it wasn't the full blown one like you read about or see videos about, where somebody goes, through what seems like a tunnel and they go to the
Right.
light and they meet their guides and people who've gone before and that sort of stuff. But it wasn't that full blown thing. It was a very short one, but long enough for me to really understand that I was not my body. And I must have slipped back in, and I woke up the next morning and felt pretty good, actually. I pretty much over the flu by then. But I was just wanted to find out what was going on. How could I be my consciousness and not my body? And what's the true nature of reality? What I ended up doing was I joined the Rosicrucian Society, which is not a religion. It's a group of people who study metaphysical law. I joined it because I stumbled upon a brochure about it, and it seemed like it might answer some of my questions. So I did, and I studied, and I went through what then was a correspondence course. I'm sure if they continue to do it, it must be a online now. But
Sure.
anyway, I learned a lot from that, and in fact, I do believe that the Rosicrucians know what's going on. One of the basic things being that the reality that we experience here in this physical realm is not what it seems. And I think quantum physicists will attest to this, that in fact it's really energy. It's everything. E equals mc squared. Everything is energy, and I've come to the conclusion that it's actually conscious energy, and that we think we're separate beings, but everything is really all connected because it's vibrations, and there's no place where one vibration stops and another one starts. We're really all part of one big mind. And then I went on and did more investigation, which we can talk about, but and found scientific evidence and evidence from highly credible institutions that had been studying consciousness and reality and quantum physics and so forth, and put it all together. Kind of figured out what I believe I've figured out what's going on here. I may not be 100% right, but I think it's revealed in this book, and anybody who wants to see the information that I've gathered that I think substantiates my theory, I hope they'll read it and spread the word. So there you go, Johnny. What do you think?
Whoa. Wow. Well, I think the first question that comes to mind for me are what are the connections that are being missed by all of us? What are the things that you found that connect connect us? What is it? Is there any explanation for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the reason that I didn't believe what I was seeing when it first happened. It
Yeah.
took me a long time to figure it out. Is that we're raised to believe that nothing exists except material substance. It's the material, scientific materialist viewpoint, also called physicalism,
Right.
which really started back in the age of enlightenment in the 18th century. It came about, I believe, I've done some research on this. By the way, one of my ancestors was Susanna North Martin, was one of the women in Salem, Massachusetts, who was tried and convicted and hanged as a witch, and so I really got interested in finding out about her and finding out about that time, and I've written a book about it called A Witch in the Family. But the one of the things I discovered when I was doing that research was that there was this English uh, philosopher, I guess you would call him, named Thomas Hobbes, and he wrote a book called Leviathan. And one of the things that he put forth was that he was railing against the witch trials, both in Europe and England and Massachusetts. And he basically put forth the idea that if God created it, then that's all there is. And that if you can't see it, touch it, feel it, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as Satan. There's no such thing as demons. There's no such thing as specters. There's only physical reality. And intellectuals of that day and later on, particularly in the 18th century, picked up on that idea. And it became what is technically called deism, or the great clockmaker theory, the idea that God created the universe, wound it up like a clock, and let it go, and it's no longer involved in it. And there were a lot of intellectuals of the day, Thomas Jefferson being one of them, who bought into that. And and so later on, when Darwin came along with his theory of evolution with the survival of the fittest, they were able to dispense with God altogether. So what we have now are scientists and intellectuals who think that all that exists is material substance, and it's crazy because there's so much that exists that is not material. For example, the fact that we're talking on this podcast, and you're in North Carolina and I'm in Virginia, and somehow
Yeah.
this this conversation is working through the air somewhere. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And
anyway,
it's actually being recorded in the United Kingdom
is
to
that
really
where it's happening? Okay.
make it complex. Yeah.
So it's all going through the cloud, and the fact of
Yeah.
the matter is that our reality is like the cloud. It's consciousness that is intelligent, and we're all part of it. We're all, uh, our minds are all connected together through this one mind that in this one life that we're all part of. We think we're separate because we have uh, come into this physical reality and we're inhabiting bodies that make us think that we're separate from everything else. And and I think there's a reason that we do that and a reason that we have bodies, and we can get into that. But the fact of the matter is that yes, we have a conscious mind and we have an ego that's developed since we were born, up through usually most of it's done by about the year that you're 7 years old, and
Yeah.
we think we're separate, and we operate that way, but we're not, because below that conscious mind is an unconscious mind, which has all the memories of your this life, and below that is another layer that has all the memories of every life you've ever had. And below that is the whole infinite mind that we're all part of. And some psychics, for example, are able to tap into that, and they can communicate with people who are no longer in physical realm, and they can see what may happen in the future and what has happened in the past. Edgar Casey, for example, who was a psychic who lived in the 20th century, he lived from 1877 to 1945, tapped into that universal mind twice a day for about 20 years, and he gave over 14,000 readings, most of them having to do with medical issues that people came to him with, where their doctors weren't able to solve them, and he was able to give them a sort of prescription to take to mitigate their problems. And but many of the questions that he was asked had to do with what we're talking about today. Why are we here?
Yeah.
What's it all about? So
So
yeah,
so
there you
so
go.
what Stephen, what I'm hearing from you is that we're not we're not, physical beings have an occasional spiritual experience. We're the opposite. We're s
Absolutely,
we're
we're spiritual. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience right now.
right, right. Okay.
Exactly, and you know, that we're eternal beings. We're probes that have been sent out by the source, God, if you want to use that word. I don't like to use it because it has connotations of a man with a long white beard up on a
Yeah.
cloud. That's not what God is. God is this intelligent energy that we're all part of, and but we're probes sent out by that to and the purpose of our incarnations, the many that we've had, are to evolve. The life on Earth is evolving. It's been evolving for 3.8 billion years. And that's what it's all about. We're here to face difficulties, to overcome them, to experience joy, to experience sorrow and heartbreak, and all those things that lead us to become more evolved and more advanced individuals consciously. And so it's the growth of consciousness that is the reason for life on Earth. We're and human beings and all life forms are probes sent out by the source to evolve. And that's what
So,
we're doing. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3.8 billion years.
where you just made me think about where does religion fit into this
Well,
paradigm?
yeah, obviously, religious religions come from the idea that we're more than our physical body, or that there's something more
Yeah,
beyond than and it's right. And I think, for example, the Christian religion, I think Jesus knew exactly what was going on. He was just not people didn't necessarily understand what he was saying. I mean,
right.
he said the kingdom of heaven is within you. He said
Yeah,
that he was one of the stories that I tell in this book very briefly is that he was going to be stoned by some Jews because and he said, well, because he had said, I and the Father and I, Father being people who say think of as God,
yeah.
Father and I are one. And people said they were going to stone him for that. And he said, well, why? The good works that I do come from the Father. And he said, for what good works are you going to stone me? And they said, we're not going to stone you for good works. We're going to stone you because you are a man and you claim to be God. And his retort to that was, doesn't your law say that ye are gods? And he was quoting Psalm, I think it's written in the book,
Yeah,
98, verse 6 or something like that. You have to look at the book to find it. But so he's saying, yeah, okay, the Father and I are one, but you are too. You just don't know it. And so, yeah, people, uh,
you know,
Apostle Paul came along and he had his interpretation of Jesus, which is the one that the church has really taken. And that is that Jesus was a blood sacrifice because back 2,000 years ago, Jews used to sacrifice animals, lambs
yeah,
or whatever. And so that made sense to him. And so the church is still saying today that Jesus was a blood sacrifice. Obviously, God must need bloody sacrifices. And of course, I'm a follower of Jesus, so don't get me wrong. I believe that
no,
Jesus knew what he was talking about. Just read his words, you'll get the message.
you
But
know, I,
over here has got us diverted off on another course. And
I,
Paul
I,
never even met Jesus in the flesh.
I've come to the conclusion since I started doing these podcasts that the apostles screwed it up.
Yeah, well, Paul did, I think. And, he meant well, but he was a product of his day, and he
Right.
was a very strict Jew, and
Yeah.
Jews did sacrifices, so that's where he came down. But
Yeah.
if you read the James gospel, James was the brother of Jesus. James and James starts his gospel out by saying, "Rejoice, my brothers and sisters, for all the difficulties that," and I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
difficulties that you face, because those difficulties make you persevere, become stronger and mature, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And and James also said, faith without works is dead. He's saying you need to actually demonstrate that you have faith in
Right.
this and so forth by doing good works as Jesus did. And really, the whole idea is to become like Jesus. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, no, I appreciate that. I find what you're saying very enlightening, um, but I'm already on the train. So, well, let's talk about scientific evidence that consciousness exists outside the brain because There's so much quote science today. We're all following the science. So let's talk about that consciousness being outside the brain.
Yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead.
happy to. Yeah, let me. I think well, there are a couple of uh, things I'd like to say about that. The first has to do with quantum physics. The guy who uh, actually developed quantum theory and won the Nobel Prize for it, Max Planck, was a German physicist, and he uh, is quoted in a British newspaper, The Observer. I think it was October something, 1931, as saying that uh, conscious that we can't get beyond consciousness. Is what he said. Consciousness is the floor, is the ground of being, of reality.
Right.
And then he later on said, and I've studied this for all my life, and I'm a very uh, practical scientist, and I've come to the conclusion that uh, there is no matter as such, that the tiny molecules and and atoms are vibration, and that they are brought to that vibration by an intelligent mind, which he called the matrix, and that's of course where we get the matrix for the movie.
Uh-huh.
But and then if you want to go into some experiments that this quantum mechanics experiments that demonstrate this, the classic one is the double slit experiment. And the double slit experiment has to do with how light can behave both as a wave and as particles. And that when you have two slits and light is shined through those two slits that are about razor thin, what happens is refraction of the waves that cause it to look like a zebra pattern when it's projected onto a screen.
Uh,
But the quantum mechanics experiment with that has gun shoot proton. Light is also a proton, which Einstein demonstrated in one of his experiments. And when you shoot one proton at a time through those slits, if uh, if no one knows which proton went through which slit, it forms the zebra pattern. But if you have some sort of a record kept of which uh, slit the proton was shot through, and the researcher knows it, then you get the dots on the screen where they hit one at a time. The basic bottom line is that the researcher, what he knows or doesn't know, determines the outcome of the experiment. Now, how
right.
can that be if his consciousness stays inside his skull? It can't.
Got it.
It can't.
So,
It's got to
so,
be that we're all part of this one mind, and that when one part of the one mind knows, then the rest knows. So that's yeah.
and
And so anyway, that's then. If you want me to continue, the other uh,
yeah,
research that I think is so compelling has been done by the University of Virginia in what's called the Division of Perceptual Studies, DOPTS, Division of Perceptual, DOPTS, DOPS, DOPS, Division of Perceptual Studies, and they've been at it for almost 60 years. It was a division that was funded by the gentleman who invented the Xerox machine, gave I don't know how many billions of dollars to UVA to study reincarnation, because this guy apparently who invented the Xerox machine was interested in Buddhism.
uh,
Anyway, a they started back in the 60s. I believe the DOPS was founded in 1967, but in before that, Ian Stevenson, who became the first head of the DOPS, uh, had studied children's memories of past lives. And he had written a book by 1966, it had been published, called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation, where he has, interviewed these children and gone back and found the person that fit the description and the circumstances and dates and relatives and all that that the child was talking about. And since then, Stevenson has written a whole shelf full of books about that. I have been to DOPS, toured the place, talked to the department heads. I've interviewed the gentleman who was the head of it up until a few months ago, Jim B. Tucker, MD. He's also a child psychiatrist. But they've studied children's memories of past lives, and in the 60 years they've been doing it, they've collected over 2,500 cases, and they've investigated them, and they've been able to what they call solve 1,700 or more of them by finding the person that the child was talking about that fit the description, names, dates, and so forth. And they also study uh, near-death experiences. And of course, as you know, Raymond Moody, who got his MD from UVA, is one who wrote the first book about that about 50 years ago,
Yeah, I
called
remember reading that.
Life. And then they also study um, what's called uh, terminal lucidity, where someone has been in a coma or had Alzheimer's or been, unable to think for months before they die. And right before they die, usually within 24 hours of their death, they will become lucid and have a conversation with the people around them, and then they'll die. And they theorize that that's because the brain lets go of the person's mind, which really is not in the brain. It's our minds are
Uh,
what brains are, and this is the conclusion they've come to. What our brains are receivers of consciousness that integrate consciousness with our body, and they certainly affect our consciousness. If you get bopped on the head or you had too much to drink or whatever, it affects your consciousness because it affects the brain. But the consciousness is not created by the brain. It's received by the brain the way a TV set receives a signal and translates it into a picture and words. And the same, of course, with the cell phone and so on. So, and I've got other studies besides what's been done at UVA, but those are the two biggies for me. They've
wow. You know,
done.
years ago, I read some books by Joseph Murphy. You ever heard of Joseph Murphy?
Wasn't he like a positive thinking type guy?
He's a subconscious mind guy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
He
right.
he wa he was real big into how to tap into the subconscious, which kinda sneaks up on what you're describing, making that connection between what our brain is doing and something deeper,
Yeah. Well, I think
and,
the subconscious mind, is really what creates our reality because
uh-huh,
it's down in there for whatever reason, whether it's this life or a previous one, are beliefs that we have about ourselves and about the world. And those beliefs, your subconscious mind works to reinforce them and to, validate them, your belief.
right,
So if you
right,
think you're a victim, you're gonna be a victim. If you
right.
think you're sickly, you're gonna be sickly. So, yeah, I think your subconscious and that's one of the things that I've written books about. I've got one of them that I would recommend, called, "Let Go Your Ego," which your ego gets you in all kinds of trouble, and it's programmed probably from the time you were born until you're 7 years old, and you've got all kinds of beliefs in there that are in your subconscious mind that could be, possibly, making your life miserable. If you could
So, well, let's just take a second out, talk about ego. What do you from your perspective and all the work you've done, what is this thing about ego? What do you think what do you
well,
think that's a product of?
I can tell you very quickly, the ego is a construction, It's not you. It's a construction that was built up from the time you popped out of the womb until you were probably, 7 or 8 years old. And it is a product of how you were raised, your parents, their beliefs, your siblings and how they treated you, and, your, I guess, friends and teachers and so forth that you
Right.
had in elementary school. And it's not you. And it can get you in a lot of trouble because if you're programmed to think certain things are true and they're not, it's gonna bite you. And the way to deal with it and to overcome the ego's trap is to before you when something happens and you feel the impulse to react to it in some way, good, bad, or different, before you react, stop yourself and think about, now what happened when I was a child or sometime or other that's causing me to react this way? Because that's a belief that I have that's not helping me. It's not doing me any good. Uh, and so that's one of the basic ways to deal with the ego. Now,
Wow.
egos developed in humans, I think. Animals don't have egos, but egos developed in humans as a defense mechanism for in evolution. You had to worry about where your next meal was coming from or whether there was a lion behind that bush that was going to jump out and eat you. I mean, it serves a purpose, but in today's 21st century world, it can also get you in a lot of trouble.
I like that idea of stopping and thinking about how whatever the situation is, how it's affecting me, and how can I look back in my life and see what may have influenced me to react the way I am.
Yep.
That's great. That's really good advice. Well, let's talk a little bit about, uh, you know, why do so many people have struggle with life after death? Because what I'm hearing you say is life is really a continuum. And,
Yeah.
but it's that theory seems to me that it's outside the norm. Um, because
Well, it's outside the norm. It's from, say, the 18th century up to the present. Before Thomas Hobbes came out with his idea that nothing exists except material substance, people took life after death for granted. I mean, really. I mean, think about think about Shakespeare's soliloquy, if I can pronounce that correct. But
right,
to be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to bear arms against the sea of trouble, and by opposing in them, to sleep perchance to dream. Ah, what dreams may come in that sleeping death or whatever it is. Anyway, he's taken for granted that he's not gonna his life is not gonna end, his consciousness is not gonna end when he dies, because of the sleep of death may bring things that are even worse than what he's experiencing now. I mean, what that passage from Shakespeare is all about. I think it's Hamlet who said that. But anyway, to answer your question, the reason I think people have a hard time is because they believed what they like me, believed what they were taught in school, that nothing exists, that we're meat robots with, uh with computer-like brains, and when you pull the plug, it's pulling the plug on the computer, and so therefore that's the end.
right.
The other reason is I think that some people who've bought into that don't want to think that they're going to uh, have a afterlife because they're not real happy with the things they've done in this life, and they don't want to have to face what they think is going to be judgment. Now, what practically anybody who's had a near-death experience says, is there really is no judgment by anyone else. You do judge yourself. You do have a life review where you see how your actions and your words affected other people, but you learn and you can learn from that, but it's not like a God is judging you and sending you to hell because of it. So, but I think there are people who are worried about that, rather not think they're gonna be. They'd rather think that when they die, it's the end. So that's where I come out on the answer to that question.
Yeah, one of the folks I interviewed for our podcast is a Catholic priest who has a reputation for meeting people after death who've usually died suddenly and helping them cross some type of threshold. He's done it over 500 times,
Uh-huh.
and I found that really fascinating because it speaks to something after death, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
I know people who do that, and
uh,
they're not religious people. They're people who are connected with the Monroe Institute, which is in Western Virginia, not too far from Charlottesville, started by Robert Monroe, and I talk about Robert Monroe a lot in my new book
mhm.
because he invented a sound system called hemisync that allows or somehow enables somebody to leave their body and travel into the non-physical dimensions. And you can go to the Monroe Institute and participate in that and go out of your body if you want.
How do
And
you spell it?
I've never done it myself, but I know people who have, and I know people who are connected with and I've interviewed them with the Monroe Institute who go out of their body and find these people who are trapped,
Yeah,
uh, and think that don't realize they're dead is usually what happens, and help them find their way to the light.
yeah,
And in particular, when there's a big tragedy like 9/11, they'll a bunch of them will go out and help those people that died suddenly
yeah,
in that
and
situation.
Monroe is spelled Monore, Monroe?
Monroe, Monroe, yeah.
Yeah, the Monroe Institute for anybody that wants to investigate that. Well,
Yeah,
let's talk about your book, your current book.
right.
Tell us about it. It's the whole theory of human life, huh?
Yeah, it's called a new theory of human life and existence, and the subtitle kinda really explains. It's long. People kid me about that, and I take the kidding, and I'm aware it's a long subtitle, but it says, "A survey and synthesis of Grok's analysis, quantum physics, DOPS at UVA, Max Planck, Gnosticism, Christian doctrine, Jung, Monroe, Sheldrake, Casey, and others." So all those folks I mentioned are what they've been able to determine through their work and study and so forth, uh, is sort of the groundwork for a theory that I eventually come out with in the book, and I state that in brief says that there's one life, one mind of which we're all part of, and that this one mind wanting to know itself and to evolve, and the basic secret of life is the urge to become, sends out probes and created the physical reality that we live in, and sends probes into that so that they can experience what it's like to feel separate and to experience joy, sorrow, and all the many things we experience here, and therefore evolve because of it. And all the life has been evolving for the last 3.8 billion years, and will continue to evolve, and that and in, and that's what life is about. I also, in the book, get into what I believe is happening now, which is that we are going through a transition from the belief in material world to a more spiritual world, and that's why there's a lot of chaos and people getting mad at each other in the present day, and that over the next few years we will transition into a what some people have called going from third density to fourth density, what some others have called the age of Aquarius dawning, what others have called the fifth dimension, that we're moving into that, and that's why we seem to have be in such a troubled time because of the chaos of the old being shaken off and the new coming on. The
So
new
is that you feel that's a function of some people not willing to let go of what's possible?
absolutely, that's the chaos is caused by those who wanna hold on to the old way, the old thinking, and the old, being
Yeah,
the boss and dominating, and, the new is service to others, and, we're all one, and we need to get along and help each other.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I just a few weeks ago, I interviewed a psychiatrist, a medical doctor who is absolutely convinced that part of the path to medicine is through spirituality.
yeah.
Very, very interesting conversation I had with him, and I've actually been reading his book. It's very fascinating. But I think I'm gonna have to read your book, Stephen.
Yeah, please do, yeah. I think that, that he's right. I think that, what's in our minds creates
Yeah,
our reality, and that goes for our health as well. I mean, certainly
yeah,
you need to take care of yourself and to have the right kind of diet and don't smoke and all that, but also you need, I think, if you believe that you're gonna get well, you'll get well.
right, right. Well, Stephen Hawley Martin, this has been a fascinating conversation, at least for Johnny Mango. I hope it is for others. I really want to thank you for joining us today, and let's what's the you don't have to give the whole title of that book. You know what the title you know
No,
what the title
that
the
it
title the title sounds like a soup recipe.
it does. Yeah, I agree with but, yeah, it's called A New Theory of Human Life and Existence. Go to Amazon, plug that in, put Martin after by Stephen Martin or Stephen Hawley Martin, or even just put the word Martin, it'll probably pop up right to the top,
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
it's the number 1 new release right now on, Amazon, in the cosmology, area, yeah.
Okay.
So it is number
Cosmology.
1 new release in cosmology
All
on Am
right. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been enlightening.
well, I've had a good time, and I've enjoyed talking with you, Johnny, so, I hope we can do it again someday.
Yes, sir. You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.